Good evening. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission for the Municipality of Anchorage. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Dean? Here. Mr. Ferguson?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Spring?
Here.
Mr. Strike?
Excused.
Ms. Barker? Here. Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Sporhays?
Here.
Mr. Kange?
Excused.
Thank you.
We have the minutes for the October 6th and October 13th meetings. Do we have any corrections to those minutes? Seeing and hearing none, those minutes are approved as submitted. Mr. Spring, can you handle disclosures, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Prior to the asking for Commissioners' notification of disclosures, I'd like to make a motion to postpone case 2014-0183 Anchorage School District Site Plan for South Anchorage High School Stadium Improvements. This will be in order to expedite the disclosures, since it's unnecessary to do so if this case is going to be postponed.
Okay, hit your motion
Sorry,
button,
there you
Mr.
go.
Spring. Thank you. I would like to confirm with staff that they have requested a postponement. Is that correct, staff?
That's my understanding, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, are we postponing to a date certain?
I would defer to the staff if they have any suggestions in that regard.
It would be best for this case to be postponed to the January 5th meeting, but I suppose there ought to be some discussion of the number of commissioners who will be present at that meeting before a date is finalized. The January 12th agenda is relatively full.
Okay. Let's poll the commissioners, and then we will set a date and do it at one time, if that's okay with staff and everybody. The commissioners present. Is there anyone present here now that knows they will not be present on January 5? I see and hear none. So I'm assuming we have at least 7. We cannot and will not promise a full board. I understand the applicant may want that, but there's no way we can assure that. These are all volunteers, so on that one. We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Spring to move case 2014-0183 to January 5th. Do we have any discussion on that motion? Do we have any objection to that motion? Seeing and hearing none, that motion is carried. For the audience, what we just did was postpone South High School to January 5th. I'm sorry if you came out tonight to participate. We appreciate you coming out, but the applicant has requested we postpone it. We've done it early, so you didn't have to sit here till 10:30 to find out you weren't going to get to start. We will take it up on January 5. Mr. Spring, would you care to do the rest of the?
Yes. Any disclosures, Commissioner Robinson?
No.
Commissioner Walker?
None.
Commissioner Chair Ferguson?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'll be abstaining from the resolutions tonight. I was not present for that meeting. So.
I'm sorry, which one? Oh, resolution?
From the consent agenda, yes.
Okay.
Are you done, Mr. Walker?
Yes.
On case 2014-0172, conditional use permit for bulk storage. I know the applicant. I've had business dealings with the applicant. I sold an applicant a crane back in the 1990s. The applicant paid for the crane with 3 sacks of 20s, 50s, and $100 bills that I had to take to the bank and deposit, and I spent a year with the IRS explaining where the money came from. That does not impact my ability to vote fairly on this issue, but if the question was raised, did the applicant give you sacks full of money, I'd have to answer yes. I have no further disclosures.
Not sure how to deal with that one, but I'm not going to make a motion. I'll make a motion to direct Commissioner Ferguson to participate.
Hit your button.
Yeah, sorry.
It's you to carry, John.
So, all in favor? Vote yes. It, did it pass?
Yeah, it passed.
Okay.
That's weird. It couldn't, they weren't up there. There they are.
All right, that motion passed. Any other disclosures? Commissioner Ferguson?
No, sir.
Commissioner Dean?
I'm also going to abstain from the consent agenda. I was not here for that meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Suarez?
Thank you, Commissioner Spring. I'd like to disclose case 2014-0177, the Granite Construction Company. I'd like to disclose that within the past 12 months, I represented a potential buyer for this site. Commercial real estate's kind of confusing sometimes. I worked with the minority partner in that organization that was looking to purchase this gravel pit located at 1911 Old Glen Highway. What ended up happening is the potential purchaser must have been in the doghouse because he went with his wife's representation, which kind of caused a little bit of animosity between the partners. I have no longer been involved with the project, and I'm not sure if they ended up purchasing the real estate or not.
I will then direct the standard questions to you, if you don't mind, regarding whether or not you have a substantial financial interest or substantial private interest in the matter now before the body. And is that interest a substantial part of the present action?
No.
One that varies directly and substantially with the outcome?
No.
Immediate and known or conjectural and dependent on factors beyond the body's action?
No.
Significant monetarily?
No.
Generally possessed by a large group or only by the individual?
And no.
I will make a motion then to direct Commissioner Voorhees to participate in this case. All in favor, vote.
Nothing
John,
to
would you turn
disclose.
your mic?
Commissioner Barker?
Nothing to disclose.
And I have no disclosures.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Spring. Commissioner Robinson, will you please handle the consent agenda?
Yes, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
We need a second, please. We have a second on the consent agenda. We've got two people abstaining, so we all have to vote, I think, to get this to pass. Anybody want to pull anything on the consent agenda?
Yeah, I can't indicate on my monitor, but I would like to make a pull resolution 2014-060.
Okay. Anybody want to pull anything else? All right. Let's use our machine to vote on the rest of the consent agenda, please. That motion carries. Mr. Spring, would you care to speak to 2014-0160?
Yes, just a minor point regarding the findings of fact. I see that there's really two parts of this ordinance amendment, one involving regulation of menu board signs and the other involving signs that have architectural features and increases the allowable signage to compensate for the elimination of that. And I just didn't see a finding regarding that second part of the action that we took. It seems appropriate to have a finding for all the different sections. I can suggest some wording, but I would rather them to go back and add wording based on whatever discussion we
Do you
had.
remember if there were findings made that night?
Well, I know we talked about that issue regarding the sign increase in size and the architectural features. I know it's minor. I hate to bring it up, but it just seems appropriate to
Well,
have
we brought it up,
a finding.
so, why don't you make a motion to pull it and ask for the findings to be looked at? Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Do we have a second? We have a second. I would also take this opportunity to point out there seems to be a discrepancy between our agenda and the numbers. The agenda shows this is 2014-0160. The resolution shows it 2014-060, and got the same issue on all three of these. In fact, we got a little tougher issue on well, maybe not. Wait a minute. I'm wrong. I apologize. I got between the resolution and the case number. I'm sorry. That's my mistake. Okay. Mr. Spring, do you have anything more to say on your motion?
No.
No. Any further discussion on that motion? Let's use our machines, please. That motion carries. So that resolution will go back for clarification, and we will see it again another night. That gets us to our first case tonight, which is not a public hearing. This is case 2014-0177, a request for a minor amendment to a conditional use permit for natural resource extraction. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This request is a minor amendment to an existing conditional use permit for natural resource extraction to allow a 2-year time extension. The subject property is on the east side of the Old Glen Highway across from Loretta French Park. Gravel extraction has been an ongoing operation for 40 years. In 2009, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved a conditional use permit master plan. The petitioner has met the substantial date for filing a time extension prior to expiration. The gravel extraction operation is complete and the site is currently being reclaimed. Reclamation is anticipated to be completed by late summer of 2016. Annual reports dating from 2009 to 2014 show there have been no complaints at the site to date, and the petitioner has met the reporting requirements for annual amounts of material removed. As such, the petitioner is requesting a 2-year time extension to the conditional use permit with the same conditions as governed in the original case. That's attached to the Planning and Zoning Commission Resolution 2009-030. With that being said, the department recommends approval of a minor amendment to an existing conditional use permit for natural resource extraction to allow for a 2-year time extension expiring on December 8th, 2016. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Robinson.
Through the chair, question for staff, 2 questions actually. First is, can you still confirm that there have been no public comments received at this point?
Through the chair, Mr. Robinson, no further comments have been received to my knowledge.
Thank you. The second question is, under agency comments, there's a statement from DOT. Is the intent that the existing conditions already meet that concern, or that the staff did not think that concern was significant enough to add a condition?
Through the chair, Mr. Robinson, yeah, I took a look at the comment from the, if you're referring to the State of Alaska comment. It was not added as a condition because, as stated in the staff packet, gravel extraction is no longer being extracted out of there. They're in the process of reclaiming, and in the original resolution, any type of tracking materials on the highway, that's a condition that they need to clean that up. They have to have on-site personnel for that. So I feel that it was covered underneath the original resolution.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Spring.
Yes, through the chair. Usually when I look at these extensions, what I'm interested in is whether or not they've met the conditions that were part of the original approval. And this is a really extensive list of conditions, so I don't want to go through all of them, but I would like, I think, to make a request that staff review the conditions of approval in these cases where there's an extension, so that we can be sure that whatever conditions the Planning and Zoning Commission put on previously have been met, so that we can make an extension a lot easier for me anyway. I would appreciate that. With that said, I'll just go with one question regarding the condition number 13, proof of financial capability was one of the conditions regarding the, I think, applied to the restoration to ensure that the restoration plan was fulfilled. And do you know if that was submitted, if there is such a thing?
To my knowledge, that might be a good question for the petitioner's representative. However, yeah, it looks like that would be up at Project Management and Engineering, and I'm not sure if there is a proof of financial capability, if that's at closeout or if it's during the reclamation process.
Do we have any other questions for staff? My concern, staff, on this kind of a deal is the final inspection. They're done mining material, and they're moving towards a reclamation, and we need to make sure that there is a final on this thing, that they just in 2 years don't stop reporting and it just sort of kind of falls in a gray area. You know, I would like to see some information that this is scheduled. So, since this expires in December 2016, the reclamation would have to be done by roughly October of 2016. And so I would like to see an inspection report of the reclamation with the next packet, because that's the key to this thing. I understand Commissioner Springs' question on the financial capability, but the way I would prove that would be to ask to see the reclamation done, and if they finish the reclamation with their last dollar, I don't really care if they got any more dollars as long as they get the reclamation finished. Is the applicant care to say anything?
Evening, my name's Steve Conley. I'm a resource development manager with Granite Construction. We have a bond. We're bonded with the municipality for all reclamation, and that's a standard procedure in closing out any CUP. There's all provisions in our extension, that the last one we got in 2009, of what needs to be done, and the different departments and parties will have to come out and sign off on the whole reclamation process. So we couldn't get out of our CUP without that.
Do you have anything else to say? Or do you have that?
No.
Does your representative have something to say?
Yeah.
I just wanted to echo what Mr. Winchester stated about not being able to get, sorry, I'm Michelle Ritter with Dow HCAM. I just wanted to echo what Mr. Winchester just stated about not being able to get out of the CUP. The conditional use permit governs the property until it's closed out. So that means if there's any other permitted use, the applicant cannot move forward with any of those uses until that CUP is closed. So they have there's no reason for them not to close that out. They have to, so that they can further move on with the property after it's been reclaimed.
I hear what you say, and I believe what you said is a correct statement. I have seen cases where we don't always get these things closed out correctly.
Correct.
And that's just the point I'm trying to stress,
Yeah.
is that we get them closed out. Does staff have any questions for the applicant? Or staff? Does the commission have any questions for the applicant? Hearing and hearing none, thank you very much.
For the record, the name's Connelly, Connelly.
Not Winchester?
Not Winchester.
Okay, in the matter of case 2014-0177, what's the wish of the body? Okay, we got a tie here. Mr. Robinson on a motion, and then Ms. Dean with a question. Mr. Robinson, what's your motion? Then we'll go to Ms. Dean.
The motion in the matter case 2014-177, minor amendment to an existing conditional use for natural resource extraction to allow for a 2-year time extension. I move that we approve the 2-year time extension subject to the staff conditions outlined in the packet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Ms. Dean.
Mr. Chair, could you tell us what you would think would be a good wording for something that would catch a potential situation where the company is not around to be able to finish? And I have no idea the cost of the reclamation. I have no idea for the amount of their bond, if that completely covers. Should the company go out of business, there's nothing that says a bond is always going to cover everything. You hope it does, but is there anything that you can think of that we could possibly add in order to cover that type of situation, or should we not worry about it?
I'm not as concerned financially. We've got the financial wherewithal of Granite, which are significant. They are a national contractor, and they do have that. We got a bonding company, and I don't know what if anybody out there knows what the value of the bond is, raise your hand. I don't see any hands going up, but it's a bond that's been accepted, so I'm going to assume it's adequate. My concern is trying to get a tickler from staff to say that before this comes up again, we need to do that. And so, Ms. McConnell, do you have some words of wisdom there, please?
Mr. Chair, there's a desired preliminary plat on this property, and we will not allow them to file a final plat until this conditional use is closed out. So they definitely have an incentive to make sure this is taken care of, and it's very much on our radar screen.
I mean, but we've got other situations where these kind of issues fall in a black hole and never get resolved. But okay, we accept your comments there. Okay, we've got a motion by Mr. Robinson, a second by Mr. Sporhees. Any discussions? On that one? Okay, let's use our machines. That motion is carried. So it is passed.
Mr. Chair, I would just add, if I may, that
Findings? Yeah.
that there have been, according to staff, there have been no complaints at the site. The applicant has met all the reporting requirements, and there were no public comments received.
Okay. That's correct, but this was not a public hearing, so I don't know if the...
I believe they can submit written comments.
Okay, yeah, okay. That's accepted. Anybody have anything else in the way of findings? Thank you very much. The next matter tonight is case 2014-0182, the modification of a de facto large retail establishment approval. Case 2014-0182, do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McLaughlin's not here tonight. I'm not sure exactly why, so hopefully he's okay. So I will try to cover for him on this case, but please have patience with me as I didn't write it, although of course I did review it. This is a request to modify a de facto large retail establishment approval to add 1,100 square feet to the building. This is for Anchorage Chrysler Dodge, located at 2601 East 5th Avenue. It's in the I-1 district, and there is I-1, I believe, surrounding the property on all sides. The original dealership was constructed in 1972. The petitioner proposes to add a drop-off center on the west side, which will have garage doors on the north and the south ends for people to drive their cars in to drop them off, and then presumably the dealership people will drive them out again, or vice versa, with a human-sized door and some windows on the west side. Staff analysis has concluded that the proposal generally meets the requirements, particularly of AMC 2155-130, which governs large retail establishments that existed on or before May 8th, 2001, which was the date of adoption of the standards for large retail establishments, along with the requirements for site plan approval. And the staff report establishes the condition of this particular establishment with relationship or in regard to the existing large retail establishment standards. As noted in 2155-130, the petitioner is expected to move towards compliance with the standards, and as such, the petitioner is proposing to add landscaping along Fifth Avenue. You can see their proposal on page 18 of your staff packet, and if you look at the pictures that are provided around pages 47 through 51, particularly the bottom picture on page 49, you can see that there is no landscaping in this area along Fifth Avenue, so this will be a significantly noticeable improvement to the Fifth Avenue side of this establishment and a good benefit for the public and the customers and employees of this establishment. So that said, there were a few recommended conditions that can be found on page 11. The two significant ones being to ensure that the landscape plan has required site distance triangles that comply with the state of Alaska's requirements, as Fifth Avenue is a DOT right-of-way at that location, and to resolve with planning the required screening of rooftop mechanical equipment on the addition. You can see on page, sorry, just a sec. You can see on page 22 of your staff packet that there is rooftop mechanical equipment that is visible and that is not permitted under the regulations. But with those conditions, the department recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Spring.
Yes, to the chair. I agree. I think this is a good use of the, our leverage, I guess, to get some move towards conformity that will definitely help Fifth Avenue. I do have a question, though, regarding the landscape plan that you referred to on page 18. It is proposed to install a visual landscaping requirement, right? So, and that requires 20-foot on-center tree, a mix of evergreens and deciduous. It looks like, though, on the plan that I'm looking at, that half of the frontage, in fact, the eastern half, looks like it complies fine with the visual enhancement. But then the section on the western part of the frontage looks like there's no plantings whatsoever there. It looks like it says grass, new grass. And I'm wondering, does that meet the visual enhancement landscaping requirements?
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, it's my understanding that the required amount of money, which can be found on page 40, was pretty much spent on the eastern portion. But I actually am not entirely sure, so I think that would be something to check in with the petitioner about.
It just seems, through the chair, it just seems curious.
That essentially they didn't have enough money to do the whole frontage, or that would exceed the requirements of what they were required to spend.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? I have a question. What makes this de facto?
The approval is de facto. It's assumed because at the beginning of 2155 it says that.
Because this was grandfathered before, okay, that's all I need.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Do you know, and I recognizing and I respect the fact that you found out you had this position here, do you know if there were any more comments received?
There were not.
Okay, thank you very much. Would the applicant please step forward if they're here?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners.
No cheering in the back row. Here.
We need all the cheering we can get. My name is Bill Tatum with Envision Architecture. This is Jim Hansen. He was the project architect for the work. And I guess we've read the recommendations. We don't really have any exceptions. We've already actually proceeded to resolve those. We're ready to go in first thing in the morning and resolve those with the staff. And so we're in position to secure a permit. Don't really have anything else to add unless you have some questions. I don't know if this is the right forum to talk to you more in a candid position, but I'd like to get through the process, and if I could bring up something about the process, I will do that.
You've got 10 minutes, so
I can do anything I want. I'm going to do this extremely respectfully, and this is not intended to be any kind of argument. It goes to the scale of the project, and we're not arguing anything other. This is really mostly an awareness issue to the Commission that on a project of this size, 1,000 square feet, we can submit for a permit. And because of the non-complicated nature of the process, we could get a permit really quite easily. And so we've had permits ready to go for a number of weeks now. And it seems that in this case, we had 60 days that we had to go through before we could get to this night. And the staff seemed to be, we've asked staff in several occasions, and they do a great job. They are good to work with, and we don't have any issues with respect to that. But they seem to have their hands a little bit bound by their ability to kind of expedite projects under certain circumstances. And it just seems that given the scale of the project, given the nature that, and the fact that all we're really doing is planting some landscape, the impact to the community should something go awry and we had to plant 6 trees instead of 5 or 65 bushes instead of 60. The nature of the project is such that to kind of empower them to be able to make judgment calls on small scale projects. An example for us is that we could bring a project like this and everybody, including life safety, and I always point to that, building life safety enables us to move forward in expedited fashion a lot of times to give us a permit that maybe to do footings and foundations, to let our contractors get started. But we couldn't do that on this project. We had to wait, again, like over a month to even get to this point. So the entire project is stagnated to some degree because of the inability to kind of go above the process and to enable staff to at least allow people like ourselves to be able to get permits expedited. Now, I realize it goes to scale. I don't want to endanger my client in any way to get this to fail. So I'm like kind of, only because of the size of the room and the fact that I know a couple of you guys, I'm even feeling bold enough to stand before you and bring this before you. But I'm just throwing that out as a consideration. These are what we're up against all the time. And it just seems that if life safety can do it, maybe this side of the fence could also do it as well. That's all I got to say.
We hear your question. You've got 7 or 6 minutes reserved for rebuttal, so we've got some questions up here, though. Right. And you may have some friendly voices up here.
Okay.
Ms. Dean, then Mr. Spring.
Through the chair, I was wondering, could you give us a cost estimate of those additional costs required to go through that additional 60 days than anticipated?
Yes, I really appreciate you bringing that.
I had 2 things, actually, I was hoping you could give me a cost estimate for. And the second one would be the loss of property in order to put in the landscaping. It's approximately 3,100 square feet is what I can see.
Exactly.
And the value of that property now that
Exactly.
it's not going to be able to have cars for display.
Right.
So if you could give me those 2 costs, that would be great.
I would say in this particular case, I'll answer the second question first, is that the loss of property is relatively insignificant. They have a large number of lots in their ownership, and I don't think that this was really damaging to them. to do this. In other projects, maybe, but just speaking to this one, I don't think that it's been a hardship on the owner in the long run. I think that to answer the question with respect to cost, and I assume you're talking about professional costs to do this?
There is some construction costs associated with it too, because you are delaying construction.
Yes, and that's a little bit harder. The reality is that when we put it out to bid, we told them that they would not be able to start until now anyway. So they should have built that into their bid. But in relative scale, it's really important to note, again, this is all going to scale. If this were the 50 and 40,000 square foot and even 20,000 above where the large retail projects were really intended for, my architectural fee to produce this was $19,000. My fee to do this piece, including the landscape and come and prepare for this, is over $10,000. And that's not including our civil engineer that also participated in the process. So in round numbers, the amount of effort it took to bring this 1,000 square foot space before you, the fees for this piece was almost as much as my entire architectural fee. Again, it goes to scale.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spring?
Thank you to the chair. Yes, I can see your point. I mean, it is, when I looked at it, I thought, well, this is really kind of, I didn't even realize that the ordinance applied to something that small. But I do appreciate, though, you going through the process, and I think, though, the improvements you're making in landscaping are going to be a big benefit to the community.
Yes.
It is an entrance to the city, and I've had people from out of town, say,
Agreed.
well, this is not a great, and not just your property, it's the whole Fifth Avenue that needs to be upgraded, and, it would be real attractive, I think, and it would be worthwhile community investment in the community, I think.
I appreciate that, and I would second that. I think that our city, over the last 20 years, as I look around and look at parking lots and look at streetscapes and everything, I think the landscaping is one of the single best things that's happened to the city. And while we all moaned and groaned when it first started happening, we know what's going on now, and I think it's a great way to help our city in a very beneficial way. So I don't think that's really the issue. In our case, it's more just the ability to move through the process in an expedited fashion.
What I hear you saying is that you would give us the plants if you could get through the process quicker.
We might even give you more plants if we could get through quicker.
Mr. Robinson.
I appreciate the conversation. I'd echo what Mr. Spring said. Obviously, we're here not because of the 1,100 square foot addition, but because you have a larger big box retail space that doesn't comply with the ordinance, and so we're left to sometimes these are frankly trickier than new ones because there's a negotiated, well,
Agreed.
What are we going to spend? Are we going to believe this is the dollar figure, this, that, and the other? But I guess my question is to staff. I mean, clearly there's a judgment call on whether something constitutes a public hearing or a non-public hearing. Aside from that decision, is there any other decision on these that is a more streamlined process, or does everything have the same amount of time? Is it less time if there's not a public hearing involved, so there's not the same maybe notice provisions? Maybe we could hear a little bit on that. It'd be helpful.
Through the chair, Mr. Robinson, at this time, no, there's one cutoff date for all things that come before before the commission, whether or not there is a public hearing. There is time for agency routing and receiving comments and, working on the staff report and then getting it to the commission ahead of time, in the 2 weeks before the meeting, and I'm sorry, a week plus before the meeting. So we don't have a two-tiered system depending on whether there's a public hearing or not.
And I recognize, thank you for that. I recognize we're not going to create that here tonight. I mean, I think we all know that applicants will avoid these processes whenever possible because of the time, because of the uncertainty, because of the seasons, and until we come up with some other process A and process B, I'm not sure what we do, but I do appreciate you bringing it up.
Mr. Walker.
I think I had the same feeling that some others did here, which is when I first snapped this packet open, I saw how small this thing was, and was struck by its size and the fact that they had to come here for a site plan review, and that in reality you could probably create greater negative impacts to the surrounding properties by doing something that didn't require any permitting at all, like painting the building bright pink or something like that. So I guess my question is, like Tyler said, we're not going to fix this here tonight, but does the new code, I noticed this is filed into the old code, does the new, does it streamline this process at all, or do we pretty much, do we have the same process with the new code?
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, no, the new code does streamline the process. It makes, the old code says that applications for limited site plan approval under this section shall be processed in the same manner as applications for site plan approval required for new establishments. Under the new code, there's a very clear break, well, there's a break between administrative approval of amendments and amendments that have to come back to the commission. And we've tried to paint a line. How clear that line will be, I think we'll find out in the future. But another thing that we did was that we increased the amount that an applicant has to spend moving towards compliance for big boxes. So if the petitioner had chosen to come under the new code, they could have gone through an administrative process, but they would have had to spend 20% of their project costs moving towards compliance. So I don't know how much more landscaping that would have gotten us, but they chose to come under the old code.
Thank you.
Mr. Tatum, we hear you very well, and I sat, and I've got to back staff's point. I mean, try to decide where to draw the line is a very, very difficult. This one is easy. Mm-hmm. Almost all of us would say this would have been an administrative one. But some of these get a lot closer to the line, and they are difficult. Why did you select the old code and not the new code?
In this particular case, and I will tell you, and I had a little heads up that this question might come up. In reality, we are still learning the code, so I am in no way a one to do other than just kind of immediately as it relates to the specifics of the project at hand. In this particular case, because it was an older building and we went for a non-conforming determination, we didn't really have any impact related to parking. With respect to this specific project, the differences I can see in the old and new code is really kind of, generally speaking, the new code downsizes parking requirements and upsizes landscaping requirements. In this particular case, since I wasn't going to have any parking issues, it made more sense for us from a cost standpoint and impact from a landscaping, because we knew that's where we were going down, was the landscaping route, was just to choose the path where we would have the least amount of landscaping on the project.
We hear you when you talk about your issues. One of our issues is we need people using the new code and bringing up the issues with the new code so we can get everybody up to speed.
Agreed. Until you test it, you're not going to know exactly where it is.
It's down
That's
with
right.
a very, very real project.
Right.
On that one.
We are, I will say that we are, we know it's on handwriting on the wall as we've gotten into it, and this was one of those that's caused us to kind of look and compare. We've got another project with another client, a much bigger project that we chose to go the new code with. And so we're starting to learn the differences, and fear is always related to not knowing. And the more I know about the new code, the more I'm starting to see some of the advantages and really do want to test the new code.
We need to work on the unknowns, but we need to get that done.
Exactly.
Thank you. Any further questions for the staff, or for that? It's twice now. For the applicant? What's the wish of the body on case 2014? You may have a seat.
Thank you.
What's the wish of the body on case 2014-0182? Commissioner Spring.
I'd like to move approval of the site plan review for 1,100 square foot addition to a large retail establishment in accordance with AMC 2135-020, 2150-320, and 2155-130, with the four conditions of approval contained in the staff packet on page 11.
Thank you. We have a second by Ms. Barker. Ms. Barker, do you have any comments?
Don't really have anything to add.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else care to discuss this motion? Can we use our machines, please? That motion is carried. Do we have any findings, Mr. Spring and Ms. Barker?
Yes, I have findings that the site plan meets the requirements of 2155-130 large retail establishment, and with the addition of visual enhancement landscaping along the frontage along Fifth Avenue, the site moves towards conformity for a large retail establishment, and that the landscaping proposed is the best use of the requirement to spend 10% of the cost to move towards conformity. And in addition, I believe that the landscaping would be an immense benefit to the community, especially with respect to the entrance, visual enhancement of the entrance into the city.
Ms. Barker, do you have anything? I'd like to add that I think the comments that the applicant brought forward were very insightful as to some of the issues of the process. I'd like to thank him for bringing those forward. The next case is case 2014-0184, State of Alaska, a context-sensitive solution to the Glen Highway and the Muldoon Road interchange. Do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One item to note before I begin. I apologize for the redundant copies made in the design study report attached to the staff packet. This information was put together before your comments at last week's meeting. I am aware of the request for future packets and in reducing those copies. To begin, the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities is requesting a draft design study report approval of the Glen Highway and Muldoon Road interchange improvements. The purpose of the project is to increase operations capacity and safety. The existing interchange does not meet current geometric criteria, and the ramp intersections are over capacity. As you know, recent development north of the interchange has increased both vehicle and pedestrian traffic. The department finds that the design study report meets the goals and standards that shall be reviewed, found in the policies and land use designations of the comp plan and other municipal plans. So for the standards of consistency for Anchorage 2020, Policy 36 and Policy 37 is found to conform. The 2035 Metropolitan Transportation Plan lists project number 106 as a short-term project. And the Official Streets and Highways Plan also indicates that this is a Class 3 major arterial requiring 4 lanes of roadway. The interchange is identified in project number 48 of the plan for the 2007 Anchorage Pedestrian Plan. The preferred alternative follows the recommended goals and policies, such as Goal 1, Policy 1.1, Goal 4, Policy 4.1, and the 2010 Anchorage Bicycle Plan that recommends paved shoulder bikeway and separated multi-use pathways for the Glen Highway and Muldoon Road interchange. Specific Title 21 requirements generally relate to on-lot development, not roadway development in the right-of-way. Installation of planning materials and aesthetic enhancements will follow the recommendations of the DCM under review of project management and engineering. Proposed sound wall improvements will help provide noise barriers and maintain privacy for the surrounding residential area to the southwest. Traffic engineering has stated that they will review the interchange separately, and the non-motorized transportation coordinator, which provided comments, supports the diverging diamond interchange alternative. With that being said, the department recommends approval of the draft design study report for recommendation of the alternative number 3 for the Glen Highway and Muldoon Road interchange improvements, subject to the condition found on page 8 of the staff packet. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for staff? Seeing none, but I do. I am concerned with the comments of traffic engineering. This is a highway project. I would expect traffic engineering to be significantly involved in this and have significant comment on this. I don't quite know how to interpret the review for the roadway interchange signing and striping is being conducted separately. Traffic engineering has no comment. Why don't they have a comment?
Mr. Chair, last week you brought up the fact, the commission brought up that traffic engineering had no comment on previous cases, and as this was written and already presented to you, I did not have the time to go upstairs and follow up with traffic engineering of why they have not commented this, other than it's stating that's going to be conducted under a separate review process. So to my knowledge, they'll be reviewing it. However, they decided not to comment with this packet.
Shouldn't we have an opportunity to know their input?
If I could chime in, Mr. Chair, there's parallel reviews of the DSR going on at the same time. There's a technical review, and there is a review for the Planning Commission. And we have been working with project management and engineering since it tends to be the same agencies reviewing for both. We've been working to consolidate this process, because before everybody was getting 2 copies of the DSR. They were getting a copy from PM&E to go through technical review, and they were getting a copy from planning to go through the CSS process review to come to the commission. So we are working with them in order to consolidate the reviews, and then all the comments, both the technical and the planning comments, would kind of be compiled together. I haven't had a chance to look in here to see whether they've provided any of the comments from the technical review, and we might ask the petitioner if they have received the technical review comments yet. But the traffic department has chosen to, apparently in this particular case, to make their comments through the technical review process and not through the planning process. We can certainly raise that issue with the traffic engineer that, you know, we're not getting their comments, but I think we're still trying to, it's a little bit, the process has been a little bit bumpy, and we're still trying to kind of smooth it out so that it's more efficient for everybody involved.
I support your idea to move for the efficiency. I cannot support traffic department's failure to comment on an interchange. I mean, that just doesn't seem correct. Anyone have any questions for staff? Okay, the applicant, please care to come forward. I hear the cheering crowd, cheering in the background, which is perfectly fine. It's great. If we had more happy noise like that, these would be easier meetings.
Good evening. My name is Steve Noble. I represent Dow HKM. I'm the project manager for the consultant that's been hired for this project, and I also represent DOT here tonight at this meeting. Appreciate the opportunity to come and answer your questions and maybe give you a little bit more information on what you've had to review and answer any questions that you might have. As submitted in the packet, this is a state-funded project and has received a certain amount of state funding, but it is following the federal process in case, because it's currently envisioned that probably some federal money will be needed to add to the project to complete the project. I don't want to repeat everything that you may have already read, but I just wanted to point out that we're currently at about a 35% design completion stage in the project. The diverging diamond alternative is the preferred alternative and is currently in progress towards the plans in hand submittal, which is the 75% completion stage. The The project team has been I heard the discussion about the traffic department. Project team has been working closely with the city as well as the state on this project as we've gone through the process. They were brought in very early into the stakeholder process to weigh in on the type of interchange that would be selected at this location. And we're working with them on an interim review between the 35 and 75% submittals. This is a new type of interchange for them and for all of us in Alaska. And so a lot of the signage that may be unique to this type of an interchange is yet to be worked out. We'll be following examples from the lower 48. And we're currently working on an interim submittal specifically for the municipal traffic department to be able to review the signalization timing and the signage that's going to go into this interchange. As you may recall, the DDI requires, the diverging diamond, I'm going to recall it a DDI just for simplicity's sake, does require complete reconstruction of the existing interchange. The current interchange is under capacity. It's got operational issues in both directions, really not sufficient through capacity, and the east-west direction is the main problem. And the turning movements that occur at the ramps back up into the through lanes and prevent sufficient capacity. Also, the existing interchange has only got about a 15-foot, 7-inch clearance in one direction, and it's the desire of the department when the capacity upgrades are installed to raise the bridge so that it's got 18.5-foot clearance under the bridge. The DDI really has, of all the alternatives that were evaluated, the DDI is the most efficient from a traffic operations perspective. It reduces the delay and increases the capacity beyond any of the other options. We also have the advantage of being able to construct this interchange in a way that enables us to maintain traffic on the Muldoon Road corridor while we're constructing the two bridges adjacent to the existing structure. So essentially, Muldoon Road is the temporary bypass while we're doing construction. The new bridges will be roughly 5 feet offset from the existing structure, and we'll be able to build those, and then we'll be able to move traffic onto those adjacent structures and have really minimal disruption to the existing Muldoon Road traffic. Since the 35% submittal, there has been one change, and that is in the northeast quadrant. We are working with the municipality to acquire some right-of-way to shift the northeast ramp further away from the road and to provide more space for the pedestrian facilities that will better align with the pedestrian corridor. And I'll point to that real quickly here. So in this corner, we're acquiring a little bit of space here so that we can realign this trail so that it more lines straight up with the underpass here. And we're pulling the ramp off so that there's so that retaining walls aren't necessary on both sides of that ramp. From a safety perspective, this interchange is envisioned to be significant improvement over what's existing. It does get rid of the left and right turn opposing movements for both directions. From a pedestrian standpoint, it's a much more direct pedestrian routes than what exists today. All of the pedestrian crossings, except for the right turn ramps, are envisioned to be signalized crossings. The right turn ramps are in discussion right now, to be honest. We're doing a pedestrian gap study on the right turn ramps to determine what signage and what signalization, if any, will be on those ramps. It's currently the most likely scenario I'd say right now is something similar to what is on the Diamond on-ramp to get on the loop ramp from Diamond Boulevard right now. The flashing warning beacons for the pedestrian crossing is the most likely scenario based on what's been done at other locations. It's not envisioned that it will be a pedestrian push-button stop traffic type scenario. The volumes of pedestrians are simply too low relative to the number of gaps that are going to be available. So, but from a non-motorized user's perspective, it is going to have pedestrian facilities to be able to access from both sides of the road, the full length of the corridor, a new pedestrian undercrossing that's going to be very more similar to the Glenbergaw type crossing that's there, kind of 20 feet wide. The arch structure that's there at Glenbergaw interchange is something that we envision for this. We don't have the details of this one worked out yet, but we're not just going to put in a steel culvert in this location. It's going to be something more open. There are shoulders being constructed the full length of the corridor that will also make space for commuter bicycling through the corridor. There are not bicycle lanes on either end of the corridor to tie into, and by the time you work it out to where you might be able to put bike lanes on this corridor, it really is, you end up with very small segments that make it not worth putting those in. And so at this point, we're still putting in the bike shoulders so that it could be retrofitted to have bike lanes at some future point if Muldoon Road on either end is ever added bike lanes, or if we're able to come up with some future time a signalization plan that the city and the state can agree on that would allow the bike lanes to go through this interchange. But at this point, that does not appear to be the direction that we're headed, and we're currently down a path which has 5.5-foot shoulders that would double as both a shoulder and a bike lane. We've had 2 public meetings. It's our intent to probably have at least one more, maybe 2. We're currently working on a visual simulation of the corridor that would be the beginning of our public outreach. The continuation of our public outreach would be a visual simulation or an animation of the project, so that we're going to have an alaskaddi.com website and we're going to put this out to the media and out to the local community councils and really get the word out and start an educational campaign on how to use the DDIs. I just wanted to hand out a copy of what a similar simulation looks like from the same company that generated this one. This is available on a YouTube site, but I took a screenshot. I just wanted to show you what this will look like, just so you have something that you can kind of envision from an oblique angle perspective. Can I just hand it to them, or
And bring it on up. Yeah. We'll pan them out. Thank you. Yep.
So that animation will be done probably in the February timeframe, and that's when we're going back out to the public and giving them, starting to make that available so folks can start to understand what we're going to be building out there. We are working towards a construction and obligating this project this fall for construction in early 2016. And we envision that it will largely get built next summer, but it might carry over to the 2017 year as well. With that, I'll open it up for any questions.
All right, thank you very much. We have some, Ms. Dean, then Mr. Robinson.
Through the chair, the sheet that you just handed out right now, those buildings are not the ones you were putting in for Takotnu and everything that's on here now?
This is an example from Oregon.
So this is
not our project. This is an example from a YouTube video from a project down in Oregon. It's a similar situation. It looks very similar to what we're going to build. It's amazingly similar. Even up in the northwest quadrant, it looks like Takotnu Commons, but it's not. Okay, this is Phoenix, Oregon, not Anchorage, Alaska.
So I had 2 questions. The first one was, is there any housing that's going to be removed on this project?
Through the chair, there is no acquisition envisioned on any location except for the northeast quadrant where we're acquiring space from the municipality. In the southeast quadrant, there will be a retaining wall that's fairly close to the property line. It is not our intent to acquire any private property or to or to acquire any of those residences in that southwest quadrant.
Okay, and then the next question I had was, sometimes in intersections, when you have streets of similar value, I'm not a traffic engineer, and they're merging together, you need to have one be the primary and one merge into the other. It's a little bit tough on some of the situations here that it might be a little bit hard to actually decide what is the main street and which one is merging into the other. Do you see that potentially an issue?
I understand that. I think I understand your question. That question is more typical at like there's two arterials intersecting at grade, and then you're trying to decide which one's going to get the crown and which one's going to feel like which one's got a hump going over the top of the road. In this case, we have an interchange, so we're grade separating over the Glen Highway, so that's not an issue. The bigger issue is how are we going to grade the intersections where the two lanes cross over. And in general, it's going to be very similar to a crowned roadway. And in the actual locations of the crossovers, it'll flatten out in large measure. But both those locations have a 3 or 4% longitudinal gradient of the road, and so they'll drain in the longitudinal direction and then off the road after you get out of the intersection. But the actual grading of the intersections has not been worked out yet.
Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. Could you, I think what I heard you say regarding the bike lanes was that it can be utilized as a shoulder, but your point was it could be striped or made more permanent in the future. You maybe correct me once I get to my question, but the real question is if I'm on the southeastern corner of Muldoon and if I live in Muldoon and I want to walk to Cottonu, and so I ultimately want to get to the northwest side, could you just walk me through what actually happens? Where am I? How do I get there? I still can't follow.
Okay, so in response to your first question, the 35% submittal in the draft DSR you received showed the shoulders being striped as bike lanes. In the review conference, it was determined through meeting with the state traffic engineer and the municipal traffic engineer on their policy that they're working on with regard to bike lanes and not striping them through these types of intersections, that it began to make no sense to have bike lanes that would be striped for some short little segment down here, then go away, then a short little segment here, then go away, and then another short little segment up here and go away. And so the determination was made that we should construct the space for the bike lanes. So we're going to go ahead and put a 5.5-foot shoulder in, but it won't have the bike lane striping. But it will enable the project. It's still going to have it is still going to have the buffer though on the bridge. If you noticed. Sure if you happen to notice, but on the cross section, there's a 2-foot striped median between the shoulder and the travel lane.
Mr. Noble, could you step back towards your mic? We're recording this, and even though we can hear you, the recorder can't. And Mr. Potter broke our sound system, so send him the bill.
It's not broken, is it? Okay. I have one more handout for you that's going to update you on this cross section so that in case you can't read this from where you're sitting.
All right.
So between the shoulder, so I'm looking at cross-section A, and this is a cross-section taken through the bridge itself. So you can see that there's a 5.5-foot shoulder in both directions, and then you can see that there's a 2-foot striped median. That 2-foot striped median is specifically so that the design vehicle, which in this case is a WB67, because of the access to Cottonu Commons, when they're driving through this interchange, rather than having, you see we got a 14.5-foot center lane, that's to accommodate those large trucks turning through the diverging diamond. It's wider than we would typically see. Rather than making all of the lanes 14.5 feet, on the outside we're allowing the trucks to off-track into this narrow shoulder. On the inside, we did not want the trucks to off-track into what could be in the future a bike lane, so we've installed a 2-foot stripe median that's between the shoulder and the inside travel lane. That stripe median will is planned to continue to be installed in the project, which will enable that shoulder to, at some point, be able to be striped as a bike lane. It's just not going to be done as part of our initial project because right now, there's not, from the state's perspective, there's not an acceptable way to stripe a bike lane through this intersection that's consistent with the way the policy is being implemented on other projects and across the city and across the state. That being said, we're still trying to get there, okay? In answer to your second question, if you're on the southeast corner of Muldoon, which is over, and Boundary over here, and you want to get to Cottonu, frankly, it's the same if you're on the southeast or the southwest. You walk along the outside of the road just as you normally would, then you cross to the center. And the red walkway here, you cross to the other side, and then you would, at this point, decide if you're going to go to the northwest or to the northeast. You cross, and then you walk along the outside of the road just as you normally would along any other highway. It's really that simple. It's confusing maybe it's not as intuitive walking through here, but there's really no need to construct a walkway on both sides of that bridge because you're meeting at a midpoint at the crossover intersections anyways, and so there's no point in building a pedestrian facility on both sides.
So if I may, and I'm looking at similar. It's the colored page 65 in the staff report. There's a color version in the original that's a little better, but where the green is overlain, I think, to designate some landscape elements, and it just sort of makes it look like the pathway is down below, but that's all at grade then. So I mean, once you're up, you're up, and then what you're saying is you just cross over to the east side bridge, if you will, and then you're walking along what? It's a bridge separated with like a Jersey barrier. Is that what it is?
It'll be like a bike rail Jersey barrier. We're envisioning that it's going to be more decorative than just a Jersey barrier. But yes, the walkways that are here are at essentially the same grade as the road. They'll follow the grade of the road up. It'll go up and over along the side of the bridge, one of the bridges, and then they'll cross over. These are down low. This is down lower. This is down lower, but these are following the road elevation profile.
Okay, I think that makes. I mean, I think my commissioners sometimes grow weary of me asking those types of questions, but I would remind them that we have not only a shopping center but a high school and other facilities over there, and frankly. I think your point earlier is that you're not seeing the numbers. I think you're still seeing significant pedestrian numbers. They're just not such to warrant with stoppages with the brakes needed.
Right. We're seeing 20 to 30 an hour during the peak hour, not 100, not 70 to 100, which is where the typical nationwide warrants typically start to require.
And it's not very pleasant to go there now, but if I'm trying to go over and connect into the Eagle River Trail out that way, I mean, that's how I might get over there.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Spring, you're next, but I'd like to follow up for just 1 second on Mr. Robinson's question. Could you put the Muldoon Bridge cross-section back up? Now, on the northbound, on the southbound side, which is the right-hand side with the big truck in it, that's going to have a Jersey barrier between the people and the traffic. Is that correct?
That's right. It will have bicycle height railings on both sides of this walkway.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Spring.
Thank you, through the chair. Well, interesting design. I don't think I quite grasp it all, get my head around it, but it seems like there's a lot of crossings for the pedestrians to make on this. I mean, I didn't count them all, but I think there might be like 4 or 5 crossings at grade, some of which have signals, some of which don't. Some are ramps. And I think you pointed that out in your presentation. There's a problem with the interchanges and how you get pedestrians across them. this might be better than others, I don't know, but like the Diamond Loop ramp, they have the warning signs there. It just seems to me it's not going to be a very friendly pedestrian environment, having to make that many crossings of streets there, but it's better than it is now, so I guess I'm okay with the bike, your elimination of the bike lane. I mean, it would be nice to have a bike lane across there, but I think as the non-motorized coordinator pointed out, they could also use the sidewalk, which has a Jersey barrier. So there is a way to get across there by bike, even if there isn't a bike lane per se. But is there actually 6 different traffic lights there on this bridge configuration?
No, there's actually only 2 traffic lights. The traffic lights, there's one here and one here. The lights are just simply indicating which movements are subject to those lights. But there's one signalized intersection here and one signalized intersection here. And they're 2-phase signals, so they're really stop and go for the north-south direction. There's no turning movement, so they're very fast, efficient, 60, 75-second cycles probably. As far as the pedestrians go, that's something that we're very sensitive to and is probably the number one comment that we've got concerns from the public about is with regard to, it not being intuitive for pedestrians or concerns about the pedestrian crossings. Note that, like, for example, at this southern intersection, all of these crossings will be subject to, or this crossing and this crossing will both be subject to a traffic signal. And so will this one, frankly. This one's not as obvious, but the only one that's not is this one over here, okay? So this one over here is the one that's probably going to have the warning lights on it. But some of the things that make this better than a partial cloverleaf from a pedestrian crossing standpoint is that you have much narrower intersections. When a pedestrian approaches to cross these lanes, they're only crossing 2 lanes at 3 lanes at most, and the traffic's in the same direction. They're not crossing across 2 bidirectional roads, so it's like crossing a one-way road for them. So they got a lot shorter distances. If you think about it, if you're on this side and you're going to this side, you only have to cross 6 lanes of traffic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can cross that many at a single Tudor Lake Otis type intersection, just crossing one leg. And so it's more crossings, but they're shorter length. We think that they improve the visibility of the pedestrians because you're not having multiple movements and conflicts occurring at those intersections. There's no turning movements, no right turn on red, pedestrian conflicts, nothing like that. The ones that we're most concerned about are the on-ramps and how to make sure, and so you'll notice that we've specifically designed them so they have, the crossing occurs in a place of very linear location so that drivers can see them really well. It's not we didn't put it on the corner or around the corner or anything, or putting it in a location where the pedestrian is going to be very visible for traffic headed that direction. We are going to continue to be looking at what's been done and using best practices from across the nation. We've been researching all the ones, the other 34 that have been constructed in the U.S. and making sure that we're talking to those DOTs, researching them to the best we can and gaining the insight from what's been done elsewhere.
Thank you. That's interesting. One other follow-up question, if I may, through the chair. It looks like there's going to be a requirement for some weaving movements there. The entrance onto the northbound lane and then the exit on the northbound lane going westbound on the Glen Highway. There's going to have to be some pretty quick weaving happening there. I'm sure you've looked at that, but isn't that a little short for some of the movements?
This direction?
Well, no, to the left side where you cross over, then you want to go on the ramp, and then people coming off the ramp going north through the Cottony Center have to get over there, so you have this weaving movement happening there.
Well, except for these people move when the signal tells them they can. They're not moving. These are not merging lanes at speed. They're subject to the traffic signal. When these guys are stopped, these guys are going, and vice versa.
Oh, Okay, you said there were only 2 lights, though. You said there's a third.
But they're part of the same signal. They're close enough, they all function as one signal.
Oh, I didn't understand what you said then. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Voorhees and Ms. Barker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I apologize that I withdrew my request to speak. The applicant answered my question when they said that they were working with the other 34 DOTs, and I think you guys are doing a real cognizant, excellent job addressing the pedestrian mobility on this project, so appreciate it.
Ms. Barker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was curious about, and I'm probably going to use the wrong terminology because I'm not a transportation planner, but I'm curious about kind of the origin destination of the folks that are what the traffic load currently is on the Cloverleaves, i.e. what's the traffic count of folks that are coming up Muldoon Road and going off to the north versus going straight across versus how many folks are coming through and going to Cotonou, how much traffic is connected with the high school?
Well, I don't have all of the turning movements off the top of my head. They are in the design study report appendices. If you're intent on getting them, I can share them with you. I can tell you that there's 30,000 cars a day on Muldoon Road. It's not a highly directional road anymore, where there used to be during peak periods. It's really got heavy traffic in both directions.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of single movements anymore. I mean, there's still a very heavy right turn movement during the evening peaks from northbound traffic attempting to get on. I think there's about 1,000 right turners here and about 700 left turners. So that gives you some idea. Even during the peak hour, this interchange used to just be mostly right turners. Now, if you can imagine, there's also 700 lefts coming from the other direction compared to what used to be there. And so now we're looking at a dual on-ramp and parallel on-ramp all the way down the Glen Highway to accommodate that kind of volume. So we've really gone, as the additional development has occurred north and the additional growth has occurred on Muldoon Road, it's gone much less from being kind of a peak accommodating specific movements and possibly considering flyovers and directional type interchanges to more of an interchange that accommodates movements from all the different directions, which is one of the reasons why the DDI functions so well.
No, and that's the information that I was looking for. The other question I had is that, of course, part of the nature of what's changed with Muldoon Road is the fact that JBER has decided to make Muldoon a major gate for their employees that commute on and off the base. And I'm just wondering what coordination has been done with the installation.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, 15 years ago, I designed the Boniface Gate improvements, and at that time they would just close Muldoon whenever they wanted to. That's really not feasible for them anymore. They can do it in an emergency situation. They absolutely can, and we've had some coordination with them on as far as their impact, their participation in the project. We gave them a presentation on the improvements, gave them a chance to provide feedback, and have been including them in the reviews. But they've largely been fairly supportive and haven't had any concerns. I can't think of anything, to be honest with you, off the top of my head, other than making sure they're happy to see the capacity improvements, because the congestion that occurs there today does impact the efficiency of the gate that's there.
Thank you. No further questions.
I have a couple questions, if I may. On page 32 of your report, page 71 of the staff packet, you have a cost estimate. The final category of your cost estimate is CE and ICAP. I assume CE is construction engineering. What is ICAP?
ICAP, as it's commonly referred to, is the department's overhead that comes off of every project. Usually it's audited number that's about 4.79%, I believe. So that's audited overhead number that they are able to use to run the department. That's my understanding of it. I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's an overhead number.
It looks more like 15%, and that's the number I've seen in the past. I mean, it's $8 million number on a $51 million project.
What page are you on?
32 of your packet, 71 of the staff packet.
No, it's CE and ICAP is all mixed together. The ICAP is 4.79% of the construction costs. CE is 15%. Construction engineering is a rule of thumb what it costs to do the construction phase engineering tasks. DOT runs on average between 10 and 15% for their projects. So whenever we do a project, we just assume 15% to be conservative. So 15% of that's ICAP, or 15% is construction engineering, and then an additional 4.79% is ICAP.
I would suggest private practice would not get any work with those numbers. You also, on the same page, say the contractor will be required to dispose of solid waste at DEC-approved landfill. Would solid waste in this definition include the concrete rubble?
If the contractor did not have another use for it, yes.
I would encourage the contractor to have another use for it. Our landfills fill up. I just hope that somebody doesn't read that and say, well, concrete rubble is solid waste, therefore it has to go to the DEC landfill. Because there's a lot of things they could use it there for.
Right.
You have two types of bridges, and I believe you probably have two types of one of those. You have concrete and steel bridges you're looking at for this, correct?
Really, we're looking at deck bulb T concrete girders for this.
Okay. You don't mention construction hours. The people who drive the Glen would probably love it if the work over the Glen happened at night. I mean, it would really help the commute. And this doesn't address that.
Well, just as was accomplished on the Glen-Burgaw interchange, the bridges will be built, they'll be built during the daytime hours as well as some in the evening hours, but they'll be designed in a way that the traffic on Glen Highway is able to continue on except for nighttime closures for changing things over or lifting the girders into place or things like that. But yeah, with 50,000 cars a day on the Glen Highway, they're not going to be, the contractor's going to have very strict limitations on what lane closures they're going to be allowed to do. And nighttime closures is typically all they're allowed to do for certain periods, for short periods. And that's the real beauty of this project is we can build those bridges adjacent. Construction can largely remain undisturbed for the Glen Highway as well as for Glen Muldoon. And then we switch things over in a relatively quick period, like on a weekend, it'll be switched over to the other routes.
I have driven a DDI in Rapid City, South Dakota. I was sober, it was daylight, and I can tell you it is challenging for somebody who thinks he understands highways pretty well. It was challenging the first time I came up and approached that thing. I thought I was going the wrong way. And I mean, sign it all you want, publicize it all you want. 75% of the people who hit it will never know about it till they hit it the first time. I don't have an issue with it. I understand why you're doing it, but I'm just telling you that, maybe throttle the speeds down to 25 miles an hour for the first month. Because it just is extremely intimidating that suddenly you're there and you make a left turn, but you're not going to the far lane. You're going to this near lane, and it is confusing on that. Okay, do we have any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, the reason I primarily came down in front was to just reassure you and hope that you go to the link and the site so you can actually watch it. When Mr. Springs says he's having a tough time getting his head around it, I'm going to claim that excuse as well. And looking at the actual YouTube running of these models helped a lot. It probably would have helped you before you went to South Dakota.
I didn't know I was going to hit one. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Potter. And your time's up. on that one. I thought I saw another person in the queue. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Sporhees.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just kind of curious on the timeline of this. I don't know if I saw it in the packet.
We are working towards obligating the project next fall.
Starting
fall of 15.
Okay.
And then it will go to bid. Construction will probably be late winter, probably be winter or spring of 16.
Okay. So completion is spring is 16?
No, it'll start construction in probably around the first of the year in 16.
Okay.
It's at least a one-season project. It will take all of the summer construction season in 2016 and maybe part of the 17 season.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? What's the wish of the body on case 2014-0184? Draft design study report for the Glen Highway Muldoon interchange. Mr. Sporhees.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion to approve the applicant's packet here for the case, and I think that they did a real thorough job, and I don't have any recommendations.
Okay. Does that include the department recommendations on page 8, all one of them? Does that include the department recommendations?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Robinson, you're seconding the motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Sporhees or Mr. Robinson, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just that I'll be supporting the motion. I think the design is new to Anchorage. If our experience with roundabouts is any, I think this will be even more challenging for us to get the hang of it. I think it does accommodate all different modes. I think that, I think I'm satisfied with it. It certainly seems like an improvement, but I guess until I see it, I won't know for sure. I want to recognize that this is a highly populated area and some significant destinations on either side of the roadway has necessitated a change in this outdated facility, and but with that, we'll be supporting it.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion before we vote? Mr. Spring.
Just to add a finding that I think the preferred alternative will solve the known deficiencies on the existing facility, the existing interchange, particularly with respect to left turning movements and congestion and lack of pedestrian facilities.
Mr. Sporhees.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I'd like to just kind of echo on Commissioner Robinson's comments, and then also maybe add to the fact that I believe that this plan takes into consideration the pedestrian travel and minimizes the impact on the pedestrian travel, and through their presentation has increased my comfort level with this project going forward.
Thank you. Very well said, Mr. Sporhees. Any further comments? Seeing and hearing one none, let's vote. That motion is carried. I think the findings, we have had a good list of findings already. I would like to add my own finding that I'm glad to see that Anchorage has graduated from the traffic circles to the divergent diamond interchange. I'm glad to see that we're growing up. We're going to take about not more than a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and take up our last case, which should not take long. So we'll be back shortly, but we'll take a 10-minute recess now. The next case is case 2014-0172, a conditional use permit in accordance with AMC 2103080D to allow bulk storage of hazardous materials in the I-1 district. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is a conditional use to allow storage of 75,000 gallons of a Class 3A hazardous material, which is slightly flammable. The material to be stored is a dispersant specially designed for a specially designed oil spill product that is composed of detergent-like surfactants in low toxicity solvents. A permit was issued for a building alteration to convert a portion of a former repair garage from S1 occupancy, moderate hazard, to an H3 occupancy, high hazard. No change of use permit will be issued pending approval of a conditional use permit to store hazardous materials. The proposed reuse of the existing structures in keeping with the comprehensive development plan, Anchorage 2020, found that there was a pool of underutilized industrial property that holds the potential for more intensive industrial use or for redevelopment to other uses depending on its location and site characteristics. The I-1 district is intended for a variety of uses, which does include storage. The petition site is located in an area identified as industrial commercial on the generalized land use plan in the 1982 Anchorage Bowl Comprehensive Development Plan. Under AMC 2105060D, use-specific standard requires at least 1,000 feet from a residential district, school, hospital, or park for the storage and or dispersing of hazardous materials, which is met at this location. The petition site is a rectangular-shaped lot containing 10,155 square feet that is occupied with a warehouse that has a 3,700 square foot footprint. The site is level and is not impacted by streams, wetlands, or major drainage ways. Uses adjacent to the petition site include warehousing, parking lots, and storage facilities. The use of a portion of the existing warehouse will not alter the character of the surrounding area. The site is located in the middle of an I-1 zoned district. The storage use will not generate traffic to the site other than the initial storage of the material and when the stored materials are put in use. Access to the Old Seward Highway is via either East 72nd Avenue or East 74th Avenues. East 72nd is constructed to municipal standards with a sidewalk on both sides of the street. East 74th is a strip-paved roadway without sidewalks, and both function as local streets. The site is served by all public utilities, including public water and sanitary sewer, electric and telephone services. Storm drain facilities are located within Briarwood Street, with a catch basin located adjacent to the northwest corner of the property. All criteria for the storage of hazardous materials are met. The department does recommend approval subject to 4 conditions, with a condition 3 as amended in the memo that was laid on the table tonight, as well as being emailed on December 8th, 2014 to the commission members. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, staff. Do we have any questions for staff? Did we receive any input from the community councils?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I recognize this sounds a little bit like overkill, but I got to read this paragraph regarding public hearings. So, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Commission rules of procedures. The petitioner, including all of his or her representatives, 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups get 5 minutes. Individuals get 3 minutes. There's a timer up here that changes from green to yellow when we got 1 minute left. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the Commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any Planning and Zoning Commission any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except Commission's recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the City Clerk's office within 20 days after approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the Commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. An individual may request findings from any commission decision within 7 minutes. Is a petitioner here and wish to speak? Why don't you come on up? We might have a couple questions for you. We're friendly. The last group had a baby. That sort of helped them. Now, you could have taken a hint from that.
We tried to
Puppy
bribe
dog would have helped you guys.
Mr. Chair.
Would you please state your name and spell it, please?
Dale Tollefson, I'm with UIC-ARS. I'd like to confirm that the property owner still likes to take bags of cash.
Okay. He gave me one. He didn't take one. He gave me one.
I'm Lawrence Jorgensen. I am the petitioner's representative.
Thank you very much. Do you wish to speak, or do you want to just take questions?
Questions is fine.
Okay. Did anyone have any questions for the petitioner? I guess I'll start. Describe this material. Tell me what you'll use it for, and tell me why it's a hazardous material.
It's a non-mechanical solution to oil spill response. So if there's an oil spill out in water, then it's sprayed usually with an aircraft. It'll have spray arms that'll go out and cover the area that is saturated with oil. That's the more or less a last resort. Typically, we like to do mechanical cleanup, where we are recovering the oil and bring that back to onshore. So it's a last resort in a situation where mechanical would fail to help disperse the oil so that it can be handled naturally through microorganisms.
Okay. Is this material flammable, corrosive, explosive?
So it does have a flash point. It's 185 degrees Fahrenheit. It is listed as a hazardous material, but it's kind of like Joy dishwashing liquid. It's not a significant hazard. One of the things that we want to ensure, though, is to make sure that if there is a spill in the building in terms of warehousing it, that we are able to capture, the requirement that's provided by code, which is equivalent to one container. And each container that we have is 350 gallons, and we've calculated that we have at least 425 gallons of capture in the building in the event of a single canister failure.
Did you understand the staff's recommendation, the staff's changed recommendation today? Do you have any objection to it?
No, sir. Yes, we understand, and no objection.
Okay. Anyone else have any further questions for this? Okay, you can have a seat. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Did we get their names? Okay. All right. What is the wish of the body on case 240172? What is the wish of the body? Thank you, Mr. Robinson, very much. We have a second by Ms. Barker. Mr. Robinson?
In the matter of case 2014-0172, conditional use for storage of combustible liquids, move to approve the conditional use permit subject to staff department recommendations on page 8 of the packet, along with the revised condition submitted as a separate addendum.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson or Ms. Barker. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I'll be supporting the conditional use permit, the main motion. I believe that it meets all of the approval criteria for the conditional uses. It's appropriately located in our community, and I believe they've taken the precautions necessary.
Ms. Barker, do you have anything to add?
I would just add to that also that I find that the particular substance that they're proposing to store is something that is essential to the natural resource extraction industry that is so prevalent in our community.
Thank you. I will be supporting the motion. I'd like to point out that we received no public input, and there was no one else other than the participant spoke this evening on that. Anyone else have any further comments on this motion? Let's use our machines, please. Okay. That has carried. So that's taken care of. The motion passed. Approved. I don't believe we have anything else to come before the body. Staff, do you have anything to add?
I do, Mr. Chair. I've been asked to remind you to hang on to your South High voluminous reams of paper so that we don't have to provide you with more voluminous reams of paper.
Thank you for reminding us. We will try to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Spring, you were there and then we were gone.
Oh, I was there, yes. I thought I was still there. Just I'd like to make a report, a committee report on the AMATS, Technical Advisory Committee, that I'm liaison to. I attended a work session. It was more of a presentation by DOT on the Connecticut Arm Crossing projections and land use projections and traffic projections. And it was interesting, although I did find that I could have used more information in order to make comments, and I think the audience also felt the same way. We basically got the information as they were presenting it on a slideshow, and there wasn't a whole lot of comments. The one that I can relate is involves the regional control totals, the regional projections that they're using are substantially different from what the other agencies that do this type of stuff are using. It's substantially higher than what AMATS is contemplating using for their 2040 population projections for the Mat-Su Valley. It's higher than what the Mat-Su Borough is using for their projections in their transportation plan. Altogether, they're estimating that in 2040 there'll be about 207,000 people living in the valley. It's currently about 90,000. So that's a pretty big increase in that amount of time. And that was commented on a number of people. And of course, there is no real coordination among agencies in this area regarding what the population figures should be for the Mat-Su Borough or Anchorage. So apparently it's anybody can come up with their own. They hired an independent contractor to do it for them. As I said, we didn't really receive any documentation on it, so I can't really comment whether it makes sense or not. But for example, it's higher than what the ICER projections had in 2009, and the ICER projections had a lot of assumptions that are no longer valid, including that the gas pipeline would be built, by 2017. The bridge itself would be built by 2017, or rather next year. The state spending would be basically constant. It wouldn't be going down. The price of oil would be over $100 a barrel. So based on, and I'm not an economist, although I could act as one on television if I wanted to, I think, that based on that, I think we could only assume that the ICER, if they redid their projections, would probably be lower than it are now, not higher like Cabada is predicting. Whether or not that makes any difference, in their funding mechanism, I don't know. They're doing this in order to get a TIFIA loan from the federal government to prove that they will be able to pay back the loan through tolls. I just hope that the federal agency reviews these figures and just not accept them and does some background review of it. Otherwise, I think that it's a better piece of work than what they've done in the past. I can't tell you all the details, but with the exception of that overall projection, I think I was pretty happy with the work they did. But.
We had a request to Cabada to speak. We understand that cannot be handled by the consultants because they've left town. Do we currently have a request into Cabada to have a work session with them?
Mr. Chair, I've not yet had the opportunity to arrange one for early next year. We're still figuring out the schedules of some municipal work session projects, but I should be able to get to that in the next week or two.
Okay, I still think it would be good. And when they ask what would we like to know, I think John raised some good points here that we got to be able to afford the bridge. I mean, as a contractor, let's build it, but we got to be able to afford it. Before we adjourn, South High is a quasi-judicial issue. Everybody and their brother's looking at it. Everybody and their brother wants to talk to you about it. But it's quasi-judicial, so tell them thank you, hang up on them, and don't discuss them. I don't want to give either side any chances to appeal. Everybody's lawyered up. It's going to be a tough evening, whenever it comes, but we're going to do the best job we can, and we're going to try to make a decision that stands. That's my goal. Whatever it is, I want a decision that stands. So if they're calling you, tell them I can't talk about it. Thank you very much. It may be a little rude, but that's what we got to do. Anybody's got any questions on that or something? Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, question for staff. We got clearly a lot of comments that came in on Friday, or were distributed Friday, handed out here tonight. You know, some of the comments, letters were pretty factual and detailed. Is it staff's intent to go through any of those and provide any analysis of that, or is that up to the commission to raise those issues during the hearing?
Through the chair, Mr. Robinson, it's unusual for staff to revise the staff report after it has been finalized. That said, now that we have an extra 3 weeks, I mean, we could certainly take a look at the comments and see if they've raised any issues that we feel have not already been addressed. But generally, you know, we can address the comments that have been submitted. There's a due date for inclusion in the staff packet, and that's what we have an opportunity to address. And we don't normally have an opportunity to address comments submitted after that. But again, this being a slightly different situation, we can certainly take a quick look. But keeping in mind, staff has moved on to other cases and other, we have significant workload, so we'll do what we can.
I would say if somebody's got a specific comment or letter in there they want looked at, if you'd send them to me, I'd review them and then kick them off to staff and say maybe this one has significant merit or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of paper there. A lot of it isn't worth what's printed on, but some of it, just reading through it, looks like some got some pretty good comments. But it's like what you normally do. Anyone have anything else to come before the body?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am?
Your recent comments just reminded me that I probably haven't updated you recently on appeals from your decisions, and I thought maybe I could just take a minute.
Okay.
I think you'll recall that the MEA case was appealed and your decision was upheld. Since then, the Nordstrom Rack decision was appealed, and that will be heard by the Board of Adjustment in January. And then just recently, the GCI South Addition Tower decision was appealed.
Nordstrom Rack, I thought we approved that.
You did approve it.
Who appealed it?
A coalition of businesses in the Sears Mall.
God almighty. Yeah.
It wasn't a public hearing. It was an administrative. It was like what happened with the Alaska Chrysler Dodge. It was an amendment to a de facto site plan approval, and you approved it, and they appealed. So I just wanted to let you know. I'll try to keep you posted on how those go.
Please do. Mr. Sporhees?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the Nordstrom Rack being appealed, as the board, do we have the authority to grant the Nordstrom Rack to provide access into the mall. That seems to be the major.
I'm not going to discuss a decision we already made, Brandon. I don't know.
Well, I'm not either, but if we're going to appeal it, do we have the
No.
authority?
We're not appealing it. Other people are appealing our decision. Our decision has been made and signed off on, and so I don't know what good going back and looking at that. That may be construed by people as saying our decision was weak. So good, bad, or ugly, we made a decision. It's our decision, and we hang to it.
I agree.
Okay. All right, the chair is looking for a motion to adjourn. God, 27 times. We are adjourned, people. Drive carefully. We need you. Thank you all for coming.